Welcome to the PM Therapy Podcast. This is where we talk about the struggles PMs face and how to navigate those struggles. I'm really excited to have our guest today, Elizabeth. I've been a huge fan of your work. I love your blog. So I'm really excited to actually get to speak to you and to get to know more about your story. So without further ado, Elizabeth, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well today. So it's Thursday. It's the evening here in the UK. We've had a beautiful sunshine day, and I'm looking forward to chatting about all things project management, seeing what questions come up,
Nice.
and then I'm also looking forward to Friday evening when I break up for the Easter holidays and
Yeah.
get some time off work.
Nice. Now, I'm also looking forward to that as well. I need a much deserved vacation. It's been a lot of work. Yeah. So, Elizabeth, for those that don't know who you are, could you just introduce yourself?
Of course. I'm Elizabeth Harrin. I'm a career project manager. So I found project management quite early on in my working life, and I still work as a project manager today. But I also write books now. I mentor other people. I do a bit of training. I write the Rebel's Guide to Project Management blog. And basically, it all ends up towards me trying to help people get more work done with less stress and just enjoy the world of project management a bit more.
Nice. And how long have you been in project management?
Ooh, um, over 20, I say over 20 years, but I've said over 20 years for a few years now. So we're probably pushing over 25. But yeah, I've been doing it a long time. I'm quite
Nice.
old.
Yeah. No. Like I've been saying over 15 years for a while. So it's like, so I totally understand. Yeah. Nice. So, Elizabeth, what's one thing that people might not know about you from, reading your LinkedIn profile?
Um, well, I'm only 5'2". So one of the things that comes up when I meet people in real life, because often we communicate a lot these days in these
Yeah.
little boxes, don't we? Because we are doing a lot of work virtually. So when I meet people in real life, they might not realize that I have to look up to them because
Yeah.
most people are taller than me.
Yeah. Nice. No. Yeah. Zoom is like Zoom or Teams or whatever. It's a leveler, right? So that's that. Everybody looks
Yes,
the same height. Yeah.
we're all the same height. We all look, if you especially if you're just fitting in your head, you all
Yeah.
look the same. But no,
Yeah.
people obviously clearly don't look all the same. But the
Yeah.
height thing does always catch me out when I meet some of my colleagues, um,
Right.
who are over 6 foot in the office. It's like, oh,
Yeah. Nice. So awesome. So, Elizabeth, let's switch gears a bit. I want to go into your background. So how did you first get into project and program management?
well, I didn't set out to do it, to be honest, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do because I left university with an English literature and linguistics degree, which doesn't really naturally lead into any particular job. But in the UK, we have a thing called the milk round, or we did then, which were interviewing for large blue chip companies and joining a graduate training scheme. So that's what I did because I thought, I want to work in a company, but I don't really know what kind of jobs are in a company because there wasn't really a lot of support in understanding that kind of thing. So I got a job with American Express and then did 3-month placements in various different departments. And one of those was a team called Business Reengineering, which was their project management team. And it just sort of clicked and a light bulb went off where I started to think this is all about making lists and facilitating and helping people get things done. And I had made lists and done checklists and created a schedule for my whole interview and recruitment process for all the jobs I was applying for. It just felt like a really natural fit to be to understand that this was actually a job. So once, that was lucky because there were lots of other places within American Express I could have ended up. It just happened that I
Mm,
got allocated this particular department,
mm,
which set me off on the trajectory really, because then when that graduate training scheme finished and I needed to look for another job, I kind of thought project management sounded like the kind of thing I would like to do and do more of. Let me
mm.
try and find a position that has that as the majority of its that I would be doing that the majority of my time.
Hey there, just quickly, are you looking for a PM role? Have you been struggling in this insane, crazy job market? Well, if this sounds like you, we might be able to help you. We've helped lots of people land 100 to 300K PM roles All you have to do is just click on the link below, answer some questions. And if we see that there's an initial fit, you will be invited to a free 30-minute call where we can further assess your job search goals and challenges. And if we see that we'll be able to help you, we would explain to you how we can do that and what the next steps will be. All right, then, back to the show. Yeah.
So I did, and I never looked back.
Nice. So would you say that project management sort of lends itself to your personality? So would you consider yourself, naturally organized, and you're very goal oriented? Would you say sort of project management just it's a natural fit for your personality?
Yes, I think so. I am very organized. I was brought up to be very organized by a very organized mother. So I've always written lists for everything and tick things off, and I like completing tasks. Sometimes I even write something on my to-do list just so that I can cross it off to get that buzz from having done it. So that, I know project management there's a lot more to it than that, but equally I'm naturally quite risk averse. So I'm always the one thinking about, we ought to pack an umbrella, we ought to pack snacks in case we get delayed on the journey. And all of those things play into the kind of core project management skills.
Yeah. And what's your thought on it? Do you think that there are some personality types that might not lend themselves to project management? Like, if you are not an organized person, do you think that you can be a good PM?
That's a good question. So there was someone who contacted me the other day and asked for some mentoring support, and her concern was that she always left everything to the last minute, and what tools could she get that would magically improve her ability to be organized. And I thought, well, actually, there's 1,000 project management tools, isn't there, and different time management techniques and productivity advice that you can use. But if you've got to the age of 45 or whatever it was, and not found a way of motivating yourself or being able to do tasks in advance so that they didn't sneak up on you, then chances are that was going to be quite a difficult thing to overcome, because all the classic advice around block time out in your diary beforehand, make sure that you do a 2-week look ahead so that you know what's coming up, so you can make sure that you're prepared for your meetings and things in advance. All of that we can do, but it's not rocket science. So I do. So that's a long way of saying, yes, I do think there are some types of personality traits that make it easier to be a project manager. The flip side of that is that these days, I think every role has a piece of project management in it, or at least the vast majority of sort of office-based jobs will get you involved with projects, because projects are the way that organizations deliver strategy. Change happens in organizations, and most jobs at some point are going to be touched by that if you're in an individual contributor type role or a subject matter expert. And you'll get pulled into a project in some shape or form to give your expertise, or even just to be trained or to deliver training to your team, to cascade information. So I think these days lots of roles require basic project management skills, and we can't all be brilliant at it, right? Otherwise there wouldn't be a job of cool project manager, because we'd all just naturally be amazing and everyone would just get all their work done all the time on time, which clearly doesn't happen in real life. So I think that it's not a blocker. If you feel that you're not a disorganized person but project management is your dream, I'm sure there are ways that you can overcome that.
Yeah, I actually knew a project manager. He was actually one of my seniors, and he was a good project manager, but he never had plans.
Really?
Yeah, so it's the first time okay, so he is very good at politics, like when it comes to influence his stakeholder, like that was his thing. But he never had plans. Like, he just had like a notebook and all of that. So I don't know how he did it, but he was very successful and he was promoted. So but that was the first and only time I've seen a project manager that runs projects without plans. So I just thought that was.
That is interesting. But to be fair, the more senior you get, the less detail your plans have. I've certainly found that I went from managing an ERP project with like 500 lines in Microsoft Project, and we updated it and we printed it out. God, goodness knows why I ever did that. I printed it out and sellotaped all the pages together and put them on the wall. so that we could see back in the days when we were all in the office. But nowadays, I think you get to a certain point where there's some intuition and professional background comes into play, and
Yeah.
a task list, which perhaps it isn't a full Microsoft project schedule or equivalent tool, whatever it is you use in your organization.
Yeah.
You might be able to get away with less
Yeah.
schedule. Also, because a lot of the work we do is very complex, and project management software is typically designed for when you know the dates and you know how long a task is going to take. And if you're
Mm,
doing a lot of work with subject matter experts, knowledge work, how long does it take to write a policy? Probably 20 minutes to come up with the content of the policy or to change a paragraph. And then there's this whole process of socializing the new ideas,
yeah.
stakeholder engagement, approval cycles, and blah, 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 that takes as long as it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. Yep. Hi, Caroline. I saw Caroline just left a comment. By the way, if you have questions, just leave them in the comment and we'll get to them. Elizabeth, I want to do a little pivot. So what would you say was the most what would you
Sorry,
say
I recognize
no,
Caroline's name.
oh, yeah, no, for sure. What would you say was the most pivotal moment in your career?
Probably not a project one, to be honest. I would say career-wise, the biggest pivot I made was coming back from maternity leave and adapting to what work life was as a parent. I went back to work part-time, and that meant I was given different responsibilities, different work to do, and also I had different responsibilities at home. So it became much more of a juggle.
Mm, I see. I see. And when you say, what was that transition like? Like, coming from, I guess, working, going on maternity leave and coming back. Like, what was that coming back like for you?
Um, Honestly, it was great to come back to work. And I didn't regret coming back to work because I missed it while I was off. So I got a lot of personal pleasure from work as well as being a parent. It's not like I was trying to escape my children, but I felt that I needed to go back to work to do work things as well and be a whole person rather than just a parent.
Mm,
Although there's nothing wrong with being just a parent either, but it wasn't the right choice for me. But I think what I realized when I came back is how other people treated me differently. So there were certain things that I was not invited to. It was harder to go to the pub after work because I needed to get home. I chose to go home, and that balance was really awkward. And trying to
mm,
think through, there was one project I worked on. I didn't work on Fridays, and they had their project team meeting on a Friday in the middle of the day, like 11:30 or something. And they asked me to pick up this project. So I said, I can do that, but I can't join that meeting because it's on my non-working day.
mm,
And they said, okay, no problem. We'll get that changed. And then they came back and said, oh, we can't get that changed. And stupidly, don't ever do this. I said, okay, no problem. I'll join the meeting on my non-working day. Why? I
mm.
don't know why anyway, because you do, don't you? You don't want it to be a drama. You don't. I
Yeah.
didn't want my part-time working to be a blocker for anybody else, and I was thinking I was doing a helpful thing. So, if that meeting had been 9 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I could at least have done something else with the day. But
Yeah.
instead, it was the middle of the day. So I had to manage my time differently, and I wasn't always great at setting boundaries. And a lot of
Mm.
learnings to come from that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, this is something that many people struggle with because, yeah, like you mentioned, you don't want to rock the boat and, there's all this pressure, on the personal front and also, in the career front to prove that, you're still as capable as you were, right? So there's all that, going on and yeah, so sometimes we don't enforce boundaries as we should. No, thanks for sharing that. How did you start Rebel's Guide to PM?
Well, that started as Girls Guide to PM, and there's a story about the name change. But back in the day, it must have been 2006, and I was looking at what do authors do to promote books. My first book was coming out, and I back in 2006, there wasn't an awful lot of project management content online. There certainly weren't that many YouTube channels or anything like that. So I just was doing some research, thinking, blogging sounds like something that would be a good thing. There's more writing, which I really enjoyed, and getting my voice out there. But also, I worked in a department at the time which was at least 50% women, probably more. And all my project management friends were women. For me, it was a very female-oriented job. There was no bias in the workplace. It was fine. But when I read Project Manager Today magazine, when I looked up things on the internet, and I can't even remember some of the old websites that I used to look at, but all the bylines were men. When I went to conferences, all the people speaking were men. And you might get a token woman here and there, and it's so much better today, so much better. But back in 2006, it really felt that there wasn't women's voices out there about what it was like to be a project manager. And the lived experience of carrying a spare pair of shoes to work so that you don't have to trek across the city in high heels, or I went to a meeting and I had to try and find a place to express milk after I came back from work so that I could do that. Just little things that just life as a working woman just didn't seem that we were represented as well as perhaps we could have been. And of course my voice doesn't represent all women or all demographics at all, but I was hoping that I could just be perhaps a small difference, a small different voice to what I was seeing out there publicly. So that's how it started.
Nice. And feel free to tell me if this is a difficult question, because like I never quite, as you mentioned, I'm like, wow, actually that's quite interesting. I never really thought about that. But and thank you for what you do. Would you say, how do I, just give me a second, let me think about how to phrase this.
Okay.
What would you say is missing, or what was that gap that you were feeling? Like, what was that? Is there a glaring gap when it comes to like PM content, PM materials out there that doesn't quite cater to women PMs?
It's more representation, about making sure that if you looked, again, I'm talking about 20 years ago now, but what I was seeing online, what I was seeing at conferences, gave you the impression that middle-aged men were project managers, and in my experience, that was not the case. We had women of all ages doing the job, and I knew women who were very successful project managers and in different companies or at suppliers. And it just felt that, if you looked at, oh, do I want to be a project manager, and did a quick search or went to a conference to check out what it was like, you just wouldn't necessarily see that representation. But things have changed in 20 years, and the blog has changed as well. So back in those days, I wrote a lot more personal stories, and now the blog is less like my diary and hopefully a bit more useful to project managers generally.
Yeah, nice. Along the same vein, so you've accomplished a lot, Elizabeth. Do you ever feel like an imposter?
Oh, all the time, definitely. Who doesn't? You can drop a comment if you don't feel like an imposter at work. It's because project management is a role that's set up to help us feel like imposters, right? Because we start a new project and you're the least qualified person in the room at that point. I've just worked on a project. I've been on it for 2 weeks, and I know nothing. Other people have been thinking about delivering this for months because it's been their area of expertise, or they've really wanted to do it, and it's just only now that we've been able to make it possible. And I mean, and suddenly I know that I'll get there. I'll pick up the knowledge. I'll know what it is that I need to know. But that happens, a couple of times a year. If you start a new project, you're back to square one. And that's part of the reason I love project management, because it's so varied and I get to learn so much about different areas of an organization or how different parts of a business work. But it does mean that suddenly you're thrown in the deep end quite regularly, going, what on earth am I talking about? What is that person talking about? When are they going to realize that I really don't know what I'm doing? How am I going to make a plan about something I've never thought about in my entire life? But I don't think that's unusual. What do you think?
I think that that's very normal, and I also think that that is what that can contribute to a lot of stress. And I think that which I was going to ask you a follow-up question, like how do you deal with that? Because I know for me, like I was sort of the person who used to always come first in my class, right? So I don't know, it's almost like when I how do I say this? Maybe there was almost like this expectation that whenever I'm in a room, like I will be the one that knows, at least I'm up there, So
Yes.
project management and program management is a very humbling profession. Like you mentioned, like when you step into it, like you are learning, and you have to also, the least, but you're also in a leadership position, and people are looking at you to drive this complex mess, right? So it's like it's like you're at the bottom and you're at the top, so to speak. So
Yes.
I guess maybe my question, like, how do you manage all of that? Like, how do you deal with all of that? Keep your sanity, keep your anxiety under wraps, and still deliver.
What apart from wine? No, I think it's about recognizing that we bring value in our own right. So you're not the subject matter expert. I will never know everything that a director of operations will know in a hospital, for example, about how a hospital runs. I just won't. That's not my area. But I do know about scheduling. I do know about risk management. I do know about how to get a project from A to B. I do know how to convert stakeholders who think this is a rubbish project through to them thinking that it's a really good idea. So I am an expert in the room at project management and the facilitation of the process. And that's what I bring, because you can hire somebody who is an expert in marketing or sales or call handling or how to build a server. That we have those people around us, so we fill our gaps with those experts, and my job is to be the glue that brings them all together to make sure that we are a cohesive team, all working for the same reasons, pulling in the same direction, delivering that strategy. So yes, I do have moments of imposter syndrome. I think we all do, but I think I come out of it by thinking, so let's go back to my core expertise. What is it that I'm here to do? How do I get through that? How do I facilitate the process, apply the right governance, and get us out the other end?
Yeah. No, absolutely. But Elizabeth, the thing is that many people think that they can do that well. So I think that's one of the things that we struggle with. It's almost like, yeah, I mean, I can do this in my sleep, So I think that that's also part of the challenge that we struggle with, because I know a lot of times sometimes PMs are not taken seriously,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that, or what advice would you have when you're dealing with?
I think that comes down to the culture of your organization, because in organizations that sort of respect governance and project process and have a PMO, you're more likely to be able to affect change. But I also think it's down to how a project manager behaves. So if you turn up to a meeting, you're relatively passive, you let a business owner run it, for example, and you just take minutes, take actions, issue out an action log afterwards, chase up some dates on a page, you're not adding an awful lot of value more than perhaps an executive assistant would. So I can understand why people think that project management is a job that everyone can do. Also, because we all do projects, right? So if you've ever organised a sports thing or organised a wedding or organised a holiday, you've managed a project from start to finish. But when you put a big budget, a multi-million-pound budget on it, and a team of 100 people, an organisational transformation that affects 30 different offices, you start to need skills that scale up
Yeah.
beyond taking your 4 family members on a 2-week holiday. So the core things are the same, but I think the experience and the respect, is that the right word, for the profession, come when you can evidence that you can do things at scale and deliver results. And I do think it's quite reassuring when projects go in, and actually I don't, I'm not the first person on anyone's lips, because it's the individuals who have contributed their expertise and completed their tasks that are the people who've actually affected the change that will deliver that business value. I've just been in the background, removing the roadblocks, making sure that I'm creating an environment where they can do their best work. And if I get out everything else out of their way, they can take the glory as well. They did the work. They can have the credit. But I think often when things go wrong is where we prove ourselves, because we could be highlighting risks, sorting out issues, resolving things. Yeah, it's an interesting job.
Yeah. What's a hard truth about project management that nobody likes to talk about, but you think is crucial to know?
I suppose it's a similar thing to what I've just said. If it's all going well, then the project manager's role is kind of invisible. But if it's all going badly, then it's all my fault. Because so I think that's the hard truth is we have to take responsibility. You know, if you're, it's different ways that project managers are set up within organizations, and sometimes you'll have a very hands-on active business sponsor, and you are there in a consulting role almost to support them. Sometimes I've been on projects where I have been the figurehead. I've been going out talking to people, and I've had staff that work for me to deliver the project because that's how the organisation was set up. And therefore the buck did stop with me, and if it went wrong, it was on my head. So yeah, it's I think that perhaps one of the things that's difficult is having enough responsibility, or getting that boundary right of how much responsibility and accountability do I have in this role. Do you want me in that internal consultancy facilitative role, or do you want me to be out there and be the face of this and lead it? And if I am, then what happens when I move on to my next project and there's a void to fill? So that kind of scope and boundaries of your job is often quite difficult to navigate.
No, for sure. I like how you put that, like, because not projects are different, right? And it requires a mix of how much authority and responsibility do you have, right? So I think that's a very good way of putting it. Let's pivot a bit. I read this study. There was this study, I think it was done by LinkedIn, where project managers and program managers, by extension, experience the most burnout out of all professions. I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that study?
I didn't know, but I'm not surprised. It can be quite a stressful job. Probably because of that. Because I've worked with project managers, and there's been something's gone wrong. They've been flagging it for weeks and weeks, and it's still gone wrong, or some decision hasn't been taken, and that's hugely stressful. I think by and large, project managers are people who turn up to work and want to do a good job, and we want to give 100%, and we want things to be right. And if we are delayed or impeded by rubbish processes, or people who are not of the same mindset, then that can be really stressful, because you know how to get something done and you just can't. So I can understand why the job feels like it's quite stressful at times.
And somebody, a friend, was saying that he was trying to decide what to do, and somebody told him, "You're always stressed all the time. You can actually get paid for that." And they recommended project management. So.
Yes, but equally, it's hugely rewarding, isn't it? And the stress often comes from working long hours, I think, and feeling like there's always more to do, because there is. I mean, I could polish my PowerPoint slides until they were amazing, but really, life's too short to do that. So you've got to get the balance right, and that's why I think it's really important to understand about project life cycles. So expect to put more work in at the beginning, expect to put more work in at the end, but in the middle, you've got much more capacity to balance your time and manage things. And if you've set it up right at the beginning, hopefully that means that the execution phase is relatively smooth. Touch wood.
No, for sure. No, I mean, I think it's one of the best professions in the world. I mean, I think that leading without authority, like, I do enjoy that challenge. It's like, how do you, because some PMs have more authority and more influence than like executives, right? And I find that amazing to watch, because like, I really love the craft, and just I've observed many PMs, and it's amazing, like, just how they can command respect, just from how they manage projects. And I think it's pretty amazing, and that's one of the reasons why I really love this profession.
Yes, that's really interesting, because I have a mentoring group called Project Management Rebels, an inventive name, but anyway, the Rebels group got together this week, and one of the stories that were shared was how a project manager had become the go-to person just because he had such a great network. So
Yeah.
he managed to get things unlocked and managed to get things done because he knew who to speak to. And I think that's a real core skill. Just and it just speaks to that whole thing about stakeholder engagement and how you can just be influential, even though you might not be in a leadership role or an executive role. But if you know how to get things done, if you know what processes to use to get approval for the spending that you need, or you know the right person to talk to get a task done or a report created, then that puts you in a really influential position.
Definitely. And I think that if you are new to a company and you're not a PM and you really want to expand your network quickly, or you want to, like meet somebody who has influence, like look for PMs because they tend to cut across various functions.
Yes.
And they get things done, like they can navigate the entire bureaucracy. So, that would be one advice, I'll give to somebody who's not a PM. Right. All right. So Elizabeth, I want to go into some like PM craft questions. What would you say separates a high performing PM from the rest, from an average PM?
I think it's a lot of what we've already talked about. So that's stakeholder engagement, business acumen, understanding business value and why you're doing a project. How do you get results? What are the results that you're looking for? Because I think, especially now, we just don't have the money to spend or the time to spend on projects that are not going to deliver business value. So we need to be advising up and talking critically about why are we doing this project? Do we still do it? Is it meeting its business case? Talk to me about what business results we're going to get. When are we going to start seeing those benefits? How are we going to track those benefits? And I think that's what sets somebody aside who can have an impact on their organization, is somebody who sees that bigger picture.
Yeah, it's more like a strategic partner, right, as opposed to you just executing, right? Yeah.
Yes, because I think there's obviously a role for executing, and we need to be able to do that too. But if you're executing the wrong things, or if you're executing something that doesn't lead to business value, or that another project is going to come along and undo in 6 months' time because you haven't spoken to that project manager, then that's where you start to feel that it's a waste of organizational resources.
Yeah, makes sense. If you get dropped into a project that's like a mess, what are your steps to, like, how do you get it back on track?
I think getting your arms around a project is about understanding the people and then understanding the what's happened so far, what do we still need to do, and then the people who's actually going to do it. Because I think stuff gets into a mess because people have gone in different directions, or they don't know that something's needed, or some communication has broken down somewhere. So generally, if we can get clear on what the communication has been and what it is that we're trying to actually achieve, that really helps. Because I think sometimes a lot of the when I've seen it, it's been because, oh, I didn't realize that was the case, or oh, nobody told me that this was happening, or I don't agree with this, oh, if that's not happening, oh good. Those kind of stories start to get out there. So if it was me, I'd be focusing on who needs to know about this and what are they doing on the project, or what are the actual tasks, and then look for something that's a really quick win or a fix. Because if you can be shown to fix something, anything, a tiny thing, then everyone goes, oh, okay, we can recover this, that's good, I'll get back in line and I will buy into the plan. Let's get this thing fixed.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that quick win, like it just creates momentum that feeds into more momentum, right? Definitely. Okay. Do you have any productivity hacks that you can share when it comes?
There's one in my book called The Sticky 3.
Okay.
And that is about writing your 3 things for tomorrow on a sticky note, and then putting it onto your keyboard or onto your laptop, so that when you come into work the next day, you've got your 3 top goals for the day just really clear. And you don't, because my problem used to be that I'd come in and I'd go, oh, okay, the emails have come in from the teams who are working different hours to me, so now I have to go through all of that, and then someone will ping me on Teams and now I have to respond to that, and suddenly it's 11 o'clock and you haven't even made any active progress towards your things, which should be your big objectives. So if you can come in, Anyway, it works for me. Come in, see straight away, these are the 3 things I have to achieve today. And if I do that, I've had a good day, then that really helps focus the mind.
Yeah. And it's intentional. It's like, okay, and I like that you mentioned you do it the day before, right? So it's intentional. And when you come in, you are not sort of just swept with the tide,
Yes.
right? You're swept along with the tide. You have what you should. I love that. What's one thing you wish you had known 10 years ago?
Probably that nobody else will look after your career apart from you. And I know that sounds really stupid, but even now I meet people or I'm mentoring people and they're like, oh, I've done a really good job, but nobody knows about it because genuinely an organization does not look out for its people in the same way that we look out for ourselves or for each other. So, and that's just a function of organizations, right? The organization doesn't owe you a living. You can be the most brilliant project manager in the world, but if organizational needs changed and your company suddenly grows or shrinks or changes direction, you could very easily be out of a job. So I think investing in our own careers, taking responsibility for our own careers, celebrating our wins, letting people know what we've achieved, all those things are essential to do these days because everyone's so busy. No one's going, oh, who in my team's done a really good job this week? Let me have some thought, think about it. No manager's got time for that. We have to really make it easy for them to see that we are brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. I know, before, back in the day, it was almost like there was this expectation that you would be developed, right? But now that you have to really just take that into your own hands. A lot of people, personal branding became very popular recently. I mean, whether you call it personal branding or just reputation management or what have you, I think that that's very important, right? Because it's not just about just burying your head down and doing the work. Like, you also need to be able to let people know what you're doing and how amazing you are, right? Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So are you up for lightning round, Elizabeth?
Okay.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Weirdest project you've ever managed?
Installing 100 or so coffee machines.
Oh my goodness.
Was,
Which industry was this?
Are we allowed to talk more about each answer or are we lightning? I could talk coffee machines. Oh my goodness. Was a really difficult project. People were so emotionally involved in getting a coffee machine.
Wow.
We're doing
Nice.
multi-million-pound projects, but the one that everyone wanted to talk about in a team meeting was, when are we getting
Yeah.
a coffee machine?
Nice. No, that sounds like a really fun project. Yeah.
It was good.
Nice. What's your go-to way to end a meeting that's dragging on?
I would say, right, these are the actions that I've captured so far, blah, blah, blah. Do we need to meet again? Or are we done? You have to be blunt sometimes, don't you? Or we've only got 5 minutes of our time left. Or today I used to be respectful of this person's time. Maybe we should skip to the final bullet point.
Nice. So that's a power move right there. Yeah. Because I that's something that I struggled with a lot because I don't like to interrupt people, right? And I'm more of the quiet type. But after you've gotten a lot of people upset that your meetings get too long, so yeah, you learn some of those things, right? I usually just say sorry, sorry, sorry to cut you short, and just a lot of people are okay with sorry because you apologize and then
Yes,
you
you're
can.
apologising. In fact, Jan Keck is a really good facilitator who I followed. I've done one of his training courses, and he uses, can I pause you there? But he doesn't say, can I stop you there? Because that's like, aggressive. It's not
Yeah,
really. But, people don't want to be stopped, do they? But people don't mind being paused. And then you just move on and never go back to them.
and then never get unpaused.
They never
Nice.
get unpaused.
Nice. If your project if your project budget could talk, what would they say about you?
It would say, why are you tracking all this stuff that someone else is also tracking? I think we have a bit of I think it's really important not to duplicate effort. And when we have timesheets that feed into budgets and someone's tracking timesheets and someone's tracking the money aspect, it could all just be coordinated. Anyway, that's just a moan, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Biggest pet peeve in meetings.
Not talking about things that are on the talking about things that are not on the agenda, and then having to bring it back.
Yeah, nice. I think that's also common for me. That's also a pet peeve of mine, and a lot of people know that I don't quite like that. Yeah. Favorite productivity hack?
Apart from my sticky notes, probably boundaries and saying things like, I do stop at 5 o'clock on a Friday. Most nights I will stop at 5 because I'm done by then. I'm happy. I tend to put work in on the early hours, so I might log on at 7 in the morning, but by the evening time, I'm tired. So boundaries, but boundaries show up in lots of different ways, don't they? About taking on work, about what you're signing up to do in meetings, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Do less is really, I suppose, productivity hack is not to find good ways to do more, it's to say no to things and do less.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What's career advice you've ever received?
When I was at American Express, one of my managers told me I needed to learn how to play golf or I'd never get promoted. So that was, I mean, to be fair, he didn't play golf either. I think he was being a little bit sarcastic, but the understanding the culture was actually good career advice, really, because it helped me understand that maybe I wanted to look for different teams.
Yeah, for sure. Favorite PM tool?
That's over 20 years ago. I'm sure it's not like that today. Sorry.
Yeah, you'll be surprised that people still play golf. Yeah. Favorite PM tool?
I like Tom's Planner. I like the fact they've got some AI features in there. It makes it really easy. The Gantt charts look really nice. If I had to choose something that I could use every day, forever and ever, I like Microsoft Project, but I'd probably go with Excel, which I know is, I'm not supposed to say that because it's not a project management software, but everybody can access it. No one has worries about licenses, and everybody understands what a task list is.
Yeah, nice. Excel. I don't think I've ever used Excel to manage a project. Yeah. But yeah, maybe I should try it. Yeah. Awesome.
It's not the best tool for managing projects, but it ticks a lot of boxes in terms of communicating with a wider team.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Just a reminder that if you have questions, put them in the chat. So I think we have a question from Amruta. All right. Amruta says, how do you bring accountability to your team, and what ways can you make an impact when you get pushback from the team manager himself?
So if I'm getting pushback from the manager, I would want to understand what areas they're pushing back on. And if it's accountability, I'm imagining, but do correct me if I'm wrong, that you're trying to get people to take responsibility for doing their tasks and be accountable for work, and you're hearing the manager say, no, my team aren't available to do that, no, it's not important, and yet you still have to be able to deliver that project. So that's really challenging because you've ended up with conflicting priorities. The project priority, which is you have to do this work, and the team's priority, which is we don't have time, or we're just not interested in taking accountability for that. So there comes there's a few things that you can do. BAU teams that have business as usual jobs as well as project responsibilities typically find it really hard to dedicate time to projects because they have another job to do, like answering service desk tickets or running a marketing campaign or whatever it is. So we need to get approval to ring fence some of their time for a certain amount of hours per week so they've got time to do their project work. And also making sure that people know that this project is important and how it feeds into the bigger picture. So it may well be that team manager just hasn't been told in strong enough terms why the project requires the time from the team to be able to be able to deliver successfully. And that happens often when the project schedule has been set without input from the people who are doing the work. And I've worked on a project where a colleague has looked at it and gone, you must be joking, we can't do that, who made up these dates? And you think, I remember going to a meeting in Spain, and we'd flown over a couple of executives to meet with senior people on the supplier's side, and the two most senior people in the room came up with a plan on a flip chart, And I remember thinking, what are you doing? what are you? Oh, we can do testing in 2 weeks. Oh, we can write the code in 3 weeks. How do you know this? You haven't ever done that job. So I'm sorry, I got derailed by that story. But making sure that the right people are making decisions about prioritization and what needs to be involved, and involving the team in scheduling might mean that that the manager feels a bit more bought into the whole process.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a good point. Like getting buy-in from those key people early on. Yeah, because a lot of times this happens when they are just brought into the picture last minute, right? Or maybe the project was just sort of foisted upon them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's such a good point. All right, let's see. Do we have other questions?
There's one from Francesca.
Francesca. All right. As a PMs, you sometimes have to lead teams that do not directly report to you. So how do you manage keeping things on track?
I think that's been most of my career, actually, leading teams, project teams that don't work for me. There's only been a couple of projects where I've had line management responsibility for the resources. And I think that comes of setting your stall out at the beginning to say, I'm the project manager. This is what I can do for you. This is what my role is. And this is why we've come together to be able to do this project. And this is what I expect of you in terms of whether you need weekly reporting, whether you need them to create work packages, whatever sort of expectation they have. But keeping things on track comes down to building good relationships with people, because if you don't have that, they won't tell you when they're off on holiday for a couple of weeks, or they can't do something, or they haven't handed it over to a colleague, or they have handed it over to a colleague and you just haven't been told about that. So building the relationships with people means that you can just quickly ring them up or drop them an email, and they'll get back to you with whatever that status needs to be. Because keeping things on track is all about maintaining the momentum, making sure tasks are finish when they say they're going to finish and start when they're supposed to start. But often people are busy, so making sure that you can talk about making sure that you're thinking about what happens next, what's coming up next, who do I need to remind to do something, when do I need to prompt you, because you might not have done it yet and I haven't heard anything back. So just helping people be productive and efficient in their own ways.
Yeah.
Does that
No,
help?
for sure.
That was a bit waffly, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. I like what you mentioned at the beginning, developing those relationships, because like I like to think of it as an investment. Like you invest in that at the beginning and then it will pay off in the end, like a lot of those, because a lot of things don't come out in meetings. Like actually a lot of the truth about your project comes out in one-on-ones in between meetings. So I like, what you mentioned about that investment upfront. So I know we're over time, and I want to just bring this to a close because I'm sure you probably have other things to get to. For the audience that's watching, that's going to watch this, how can they get in touch with you if they wanted to do that?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch. Connect with me on LinkedIn. That probably is. I mean, I used to be all over all the different social networks, and I still am. I still have profiles, but LinkedIn's the one that I check the most often. So probably best connect with me there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for making the time. And yeah, this was great. All right. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.